here to talk about AI, artificial intelligence. And in the general sense of the word, AI has different avenues and different facets, but in essence is mimicking how we solve problems and we make decisions and these capabilities of the human mind in computers and machines. The awesome thing about tonight and the conversations we'll have will be it's focused on different facets of artificial intelligence in two different cities. In Africa, Joburg in South Africa and Kampala in Uganda, as well as two different industries, right? We have the mobile operator, the business centric, and we have healthcare. And I'm more than excited to speak to Atenkwesi and Shamim from these two different angles. To kick it off, I'd actually hand over to Atenkwesi or Ati to give a quick introduction to herself and an overview as to what she does in general. And then she'll hand over to Shamim to also give an introduction.
Hi, thank you for that, Manny. Evening, everybody. My name is Ati. Interesting story about my life is that I've got a finance degree and I've predominantly got a banking experience, years of banking experience, but I somehow found myself in the of implementing a technology called robotic process automation. And we found ourselves also converging the use of machine learning and AI together with the use of robotic process automation and having people at the center of what we do. So I work at a company called Vodacom, which is one of the biggest mobile telecommunications in South Africa, but we do operate in other countries in Africa, which is Lesotho, Mozambique, Tanzania, and the DRC. And so my portfolio spans across those countries where I've been tasked to see opportunities for implementing intelligent automation in those countries. And it's an interesting journey so far, and I'm looking forward to talking about it.
Thanks, Ati, for that overview. I'll hand over to Shamim as well to give a quick introduction to herself, and we can jump in the overview of the session tonight.
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Navuma Shamim. I'm the co-founder of Chill iLab, Chill group of companies. We use the power of artificial intelligence to offer breast and cervical cancer screening services to women in Africa. We offer teleconsultations, we offer e-pharmacy, e-referral. And at first, we used to do all this with a bit of the cancer screening and that's breast and cervical cancer. But then realized that most of our customers don't have access to good, nutritious food, and that's how another company under Shield Group came up that we link our customers to food that is nutritious, but is almost reaching expiry. And with this, we managed to do two things with one stone. Like, for example, if they're providing the good health in the hospitals, we also help them to provide them good nutrition. So that is what we basically do. And yeah, I'm happy that I'm in this platform tonight. And yeah, I'm ready for the chat.
Awesome. Thanks for that overview, Shamim, as well. I think this is the, like I said, there are so many facets and application of AI in general, and these are represented in two distinct, let's say, industries in this conversation here. One thing about AI is for most people actually venture into anything that has to do with this technological path is usually a historical, let's say, driver or a driving force for this, right? And is also why I would like to jump into the why and the driver behind AI. And I'd probably want to start with Shamim, what the driver for AI for you was and what it manifested in being implemented in Chill AI currently.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you so much for that question. Artificial intelligence. Many people are looking at artificial intelligence in their own way, but I look at artificial intelligence as something that is very positive for the community and for the things I do for the different customers that we have. Um, so for the bit of artificial intelligence, first of all, at first we used to offer services to our customers using the usual ways. For example, if you want to maybe speak to a doctor, that is for a bit of a tele cancer screening services, you have to either move to the villages or if someone has to just come to to the hospital and do that. But then realize that what happens if the numbers of people are so many? What are you going to do for all those numbers? So there was need of technology and in all that, so that we could increase our impact, because one person cannot be effective like for more than I think like 5 hours. I mean, they'll be tired. But then when you bring in the bit of artificial intelligence, it does its purpose. With a chatbot, it will say, hi, I want to speak to this one, and then it will do that faster, which is different every time, because by the time you are going to work on different customer, the efficiency you give the first one, and then the efficiency you give the last person is different. So also that comes with a bit of the food that for the bit of the chatbot, that yes, people used to move to the markets, to the food stores, and then be able to access the food. But then with the use of a chatbot, you're just linked to who has the food, and then you can be able to buy it at a reduced price. So what am I talking about artificial intelligence? Artificial intelligence has come to Africa, and then I think it is something positive, because people may say it's going to take our jobs, but then artificial intelligence helps us ease in the work that we do. It also makes everything easier. I mean, for example, during the COVID-19 situation, this is where the technology was at the peak, and this is whereby people had lockdowns and everything was down. So just imagine if your business was something like someone has to just move from home to the hospital, someone just has to move from home, go to the food store, and then access maybe food, access maybe healthcare. So with technology, with artificial intelligence, things are possible. Chatbots were there, meetings were done, and even right now we are online. Before, these things were all the time physical, like you have to make a presence somewhere. But then right now things have changed, everything is virtual. And so this is all artificial intelligence, that everything is changing with time. And that is the beauty about it. Yes, everything has its negativity, but also we look at the positive side of it and then see it isn't our work. So yeah, that is how we've been able to use artificial intelligence in what we do, and then being able to impact the communities that you work with. Despite the fact that yes, maybe many people may not have known that yes, artificial intelligence is going to rise like rapidly, like how it did like in 2020. They thought maybe it will come like in 5 years time, but now it rushed in 2020 because of COVID-19. And yeah, that's how we are, and then it's not going anywhere. So that's what
Yeah,
I do.
nice. Sounds like COVID, let's say, expedited or facilitated the adoption of AI a lot in your industry. Was it similar for you, Ati, in what you currently do? Did COVID have an impact? And it would be nice to hear aspects of how AI is also implemented in your use case.
Okay, so I think it's worth giving context to why I was hired in Vodacom. So there's a technology called robotics process automation, where it's a software that has the ability to be configured to mimic repetitive rules-based type of work. So you would observe a person working, and through the swivel chair type of work, if something is rules-based, repetitive, data structured, you know your input, you know your output, then we can replicate it and automate. And if you look at that, I've counted about 5 features that are required in order for the technology to succeed. But life is not that perfect. So then from me realizing that the technology has its limitation, and through some research that I had continuously been doing, I realized that rules-based repetitive type of automation has its place, but it can be enhanced with the use of machine learning and AI. So I'll give you an example of how a lot of corporates tend to be quite reactive in how we respond to customers. Something would break, customer complains, we fix it, right? Customer wants to leave, we try and offer something better, and hopefully customer stays. But I think using the design thinking principles, we ask ourselves, what would happen if we were to know that a customer would call us proactively? What are the things that we could do so that the customer actually doesn't have to call us and that we're able to solve for their problems proactively? What would happen if we could anticipate that a customer is actually going to default on their payment? And then before they default, we give them discounts to prevent them from defaulting. Because as you can imagine, the higher our default rates, and considering COVID and people losing their income or reducing their income, losing their income or losing their jobs, we do anticipate that there will be a spike in customers defaulting on their contractual obligations. So what would happen if we could proactively identify those customers? Or what would happen if we could proactively identify customers that could leave us? And I know that those sound like obscure concepts, right? But if you look at the concept of machine learning and AI, these are technologies that are able to mimic the brain and consume exorbitant amount of data. They see patterns, and then they're able to make recommendations. So now, we know when something is wrong, and I'm oversimplifying it just for effect. When something is wrong, customer calls us. What if we could pick up that something is wrong through the patterns on our own network? Fix that issue before it actually becomes a major issue, that the customer doesn't know that they even had an issue, and we fix it proactively. That's one aspect of it. And then if there's certain types of customers, right? So let's call them the Manny group. These kinds of customers have had a pattern in the past of consuming in this kind of pattern. They've had these kinds of network problems. They've had these kinds of complaints, many attributes related to this Manny group. And we've seen that in the past, this Manny group then ended up leaving the company. There's no person with a brain capacity to go through the millions of customers that we have to see the pattern of this Manny group, but machine learning can and AI can. And what if we could then find another group of customers that are already in our customer base that haven't yet left, but seem to be exhibiting these kinds of traits? And so before they actually leave us, right, we could proactively engage with them and almost offer them sweetened deals to try and get them to stay. And this means that these kinds of recommendations could be sent through to the sales teams, so that instead of them doing a cold call to say, hey, how are you doing? Thanks for your business, type of thing, we could say, hey, Manny, we see that this is how you've been doing business with us. Are you happy? Because we think this is a better deal for you, right? Do you see how through the use of machine learning and empowering the person, they're able to have a meaningful conversation with the customer. And then if the customer does take up that deal, instead of there being a service request that gets logged to the back office, we then can use robotics process automation. Remember how I said it's repetitive, rules-based, structured information. You know your input, you know your output. So if a customer has taken a new deal, we have to take them off the old deal and migrate them to a new deal. That is where robotics process automation comes in. So what we are then seeing is that the human is put in the center of the technology to be empowered with this mega brain, for lack of a better word. And then as a post-customer engagement activity, we use the robotics process automation technology to do the admin work that nobody really wants to do. Then that way we see an increase in a reduction in customers leaving, reduction in customer complaints. Therefore, if customers stay longer, company is actually profitable for a prolonged period. So what we are seeing in our organization is we want to almost replicate the state of perfection from a customer experience perspective, because we realize that without our customers, we wouldn't exist. So how do we use machine learning and AI to give the customer the best possible customer experience? How do we use machine learning and AI to give the employee the the best employee experience, especially when they're engaging with the customer. And that's where I think the whole conversation about man versus machine comes in, where we are saying it's actually man with machine versus man versus machine. And we are starting to see the benefits of that. It's still at its infancy, and that we started in 2020. But I think the fact that we're doing it, for me, is what's important. That the best way to do something is to do it, and we're fine-tuning it as we go along. But I think that the feedback we're getting from the people that are part of these projects is quite impressive, because they themselves didn't realize that they needed this technology up until it was in their hands. And so I think that's been, for me, one of the biggest benefits to incorporate machine learning, AI, and RPA in the daily work of the people that are in the organization, to give them a better quality of life, better employee experience and customer experience.
Yeah. I like the way you tied in the part about data coming in to the input-output process in general. And it gives me a good segue into data. So as we all know, to build a robust system regardless, and the expanse of AI and how you drive and what your input looks like really determines what your output is, what the process and how it can learn depending on what kind of AI system you build. And data is the main driver of how, let's say, how efficient your system would be. And my question also, maybe going to Shamim, is how do you deal with data? So you're in the healthcare industry, and I know your passion is and how you currently deal with data. Is mainly focused on females and oncology, and it's a niche market, and it's trying to understand the aspects of how you deal with data access and even incoming data accuracy to fuel the tools you build with AI.
Okay, thanks for that question. Most of the times when you talk about artificial intelligence, it goes hand in hand with data. When you are training, for example, it's machine learning. So you have to train, let me say you're training, let me say, for example, let me say like a chatbot, you have to train it according to the data you have. So if the data that you have is not sufficient enough, so the output isn't also going to be that good. So for the bit of the data system dealing in healthcare, there is a lot of privacy issues and all that. So we work hand in hand with the different health regulations that are really needed in the different healthcare sectors, that you can be able to access that data that we need so that you can be able to deliver the services to our customers. And then again, the only thing that limits artificial intelligence, the training of the machine is usually the data bit of it. So if you have the data to train the chatbots that you're using, the technology that you're doing, so that gives you the potential to be able to know this is what usually affects the people in this area, and this is what happens during the season, this happens during the time. So when we talk about the bit of the ecology, the bit of the healthcare sector, when you're providing the services to our customers, we usually ensure that their data is safe, so that it's not involving a third party. And then they also have to know that what we are doing is for their safety, is for their lives. For example, I can give one example. Most of the times, people usually come and say, how sure are we that our data is not going to be spilled or something like that? Because many times there is that bit of hacking, there is what, and all that. So it is a bit of us as a company and us who are providing services to our customers to ensure that the bit of that data privacy is one of our essential things that we usually do for our customers. So those are some of the crucial things that we do. And then maybe for the bit of maybe for the food sector that usually look at the bit of the nutritious food that usually give our customers. Okay, we give them to those who would want. For that, we usually know that, you know what, this is what is usually taken by most of these patients, this is what taken by most of these customers. So with that data, we are able to predict and know that this is what is wanted in the season, this is what is wanted in that season. So it's that data that usually gives us what next, what is happening in communities. And usually you see that it's data that we all depend on. For you to know the numbers of people that have died of cancers, maybe in 2019, maybe in 2020, it's about the data that is being produced. So it's all about the data that is there so that we can be able to feed into our chatbots, into the robots, and we train them. And then it works hand in hand with us, the human beings, because people usually think that it's only the machines that are doing, but then it's usually the two people that work hand in hand that they're able to train all these machines to do whatever a human being can. So that is all that we do with the data. I don't know if I was so clear on the question that you asked.
I think you covered it, Shamim. Thank you. It was leading into it, like you said, exactly. You covered the part about securing the data and how access and how it's used in general. It'll be nice to hear from you as well, Ati, how you deal with this data and how you deal with data accuracy and representation in data in general, and how you're able to apply it to your RPA processes.
So you remember for our scenario, this is us allowing customers to be themselves in their everyday lives and consumption, right? So what we do is that at any given point in our company, we know over 700 data points about you as our customer. And so this information is securely stored from a data lake perspective. So all of this information is secured, access controlled. And what we then do is when we need access to these data points, we always almost build a business case, right? That says, what are we trying to solve for? So if you go back to the example of how do we proactively identify customers who could leave us? We actually then would anonymize certain customer types, because looking at the history, we would just want to know behavior, right? So because Vodacom owns about 45% of the market share, it's quite a big market share that is a good representation of patterns within the South African landscape. So we are then able to anonymize all of this data and try and build models that can then identify any other customer that could qualify and fit into this kind of criteria. So from a bias perspective, I think we almost work around that because we're not specific in who the customer is. It's the information that tells us who the customer is. And so therefore, we're almost doing a more intelligent selection through the use of historical patterns in order for us to identify who's a next-best customer for us to target.
Yeah, clears it up for me. Data anonymity in general, I think saves a lot of GDPR cases in Berlin as well as a few startups that have been, or let's say I've had a hand in working with tech in Ghana as well. Talking about countries and different approaches, and swinging back into how these different approaches actually apply in strategy. I know for your RPA processes, Ati, you have done, or you rolled it out across SA, Lesotho, Ghana, Mozambique, quite a few varied countries in different parts of Africa. And I was trying to wonder if your approach was different in different cases, and if you took maybe different strategies and approached it basically in different ways.
Actually, it wasn't that different, right? Because at the end of the day, it's one industry, but the customers are just in different geographical locations. I'll give you an example of customer operations. Customer buys a product, eventually customer hardly ever calls us because they're happy to check up on us, right? So something has gone wrong. So what we then did was, in the same exercise I did in Tanzania, I did it in Mozambique, where I tried to understand why do customers call us. So we looked at the top 10 reasons why customers call us. Then we tried to understand when the customer calls us, right? and we cannot solve for the problem immediately. We have to log a service request. How do we solve for that problem? Then they'll say, okay, we look at the system, we look at the system. If something is broken, one system will say it like this, and then another one will say it like that, right? Then I said, okay, what would happen if we had an RPA robot that proactively goes through these systems and almost does a system reconciliation upfront? Then if it picks up that the left is not equal to the right, maybe the left is divided, therefore make the right equal to the left. Therefore, we're fixing the customer problem. We don't need to wait for the customer to call us, but we are doing those system checks in real time or near real time to prevent the customer from calling us. You see how doesn't matter what the kind of customer problem, it is something that is inherent in all the geographical locations that we operate in. So it doesn't become specific to a country. I think the only thing that is maybe unique in the different regions is from an anti-money laundering and regulatory perspective. When we're doing automations in that space, we need to consider the legal framework that guides that particular operating company from in terms of how it operates. But that's about the only thing. But because what I've realized, customers are customers, regardless of the geographical location. But I think in terms of if we are talking about sales, that becomes different in that the South African market tends to be credit friendly, right? So therefore, the kind of products that you want to offer them would be along the contracts, postpaid type of contracts, 24-month, 36-month contract, where you lock them in a contract. But you'd find that in other countries, the concept of credit ratings doesn't even exist. So therefore, you can't offer credit-based type of lending. You want to be able to offer them discounted prepaid deals. So those are the only nuances that's the sales part of it. But from a service perspective, customers generally experience the same kinds of pain points.
Yeah, that's clear to me. Talking about regulations, I know, especially with the different kinds of approaches for Chile AI, Shamim, I'm directed at you. I have and how you've had to deal with regulations in the healthcare across different sectors. It'll be nice to hear a bit about this, but I also have a question similar to what I asked Ati about, even from a regulations point of view, which Ati clarified in her industry is something you have to deal with. From the healthcare, I mean, you currently serve 850,000 women, right, across the world, and this is it's an insane figure of people and lives you influence with Chile AI, and it's also trying to figure out how this impact ties hand in hand with different strategies of how you probably roll out in different countries, if it varies, or if the regulation is the main part for Chill AI as well, and how you roll out and deal with AI strategies.
Thank you for that question. When you talk about the healthcare sector and the regulation, yes, this is Africa, and every country has its own health regulation. So if you are, for example, here in Kampala, for you to be able to do all that you do for the healthcare, you have to first register Ministry of Health. Then from Ministry of Health, you have to first go to register with the dental and medical practitioner's office. So it's a process, and then after you are able to offer service. So if you're to move to another country, again, every country in Africa has different regulations. So those are some of the factors that are usually a big hindrance to other smaller startups, because if the regulations were not as much, because for example, if you're in Uganda, it has regulations of when, if you go to Tanzania, it has some regulations. So every country that you move to, you have to, from the country that you have to give them a proof that you're already regulated in maybe in Kampala, or maybe regulated in Tanzania, and then you have to move to another country. So it really takes that process for you to be able to enter or work with another country. But then one of our biggest strategies that we usually use as Shilai, fact that we've been able to work on a given number of customers in Kampala or Uganda, and then moving to another country as we usually operate. Our impact that we've been able to provide, and then some of our customers that have been able to access our services online, some of the testimonies that usually give when we're going to other countries, so that we can be able to know that we are offering a service that is beneficial to them. And then another thing is about the marketing, both online and offline, because if you are to enter into a country, they have to first know which company is this, where has it worked, how is it going to help us, and all that. So if you've been able to portray yourself in a position that you've been able to offer services to a given number of people, and these are numbers of people that from your country have been able to offer these numbers of people. So I would love to bring in my service so that people can be able to benefit from it, even if I'm in Uganda, but some people can be able to benefit from it in your country. So that is how we are able to operate. And then another thing that usually happens in the healthcare sector is most people would not want their data to be stored in, for example, Uganda, and then we are working, for example, in Tanzania. So they don't want their data to be stored here, so they would be comfortable their data to be left to their country. So that is what usually happens in the healthcare sector. And yeah, we've been able to overcome or go through that. Yes, it usually takes a long process, takes some time, but our mission is to ensure that everyone has a comfortable life with the use of artificial intelligence and all that. So we ensure that we are able to offer services no matter the long process that we usually go through to offer services to the very minimum that we usually impact. Yes, most of people actually know about the cancers and all that, so that's why we're giving a specifically, but then also we also have food that we are also offering that bit of nutritious food, because mostly then during people lose their jobs, so the income level had decreased. So you give someone medicine and then they cannot afford something to eat, so again you're going to have them back. So we are not just to offer services that you can get a lot, maybe profit, but we want our customers to have a healthy life, and that is with a bit of the another bit of the food that we are able to link them to food that is nutritious, but it's almost reaching expiry date, right? So with this, this is something that Chile I has been doing for some time. And yeah, we're looking at increasing our impact to other countries as after going through the regulations that we usually go through, that you can be able to provide services. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's all I can say about that.
Right. The regulations can be a pain in any industry.
Exactly.
I work in
And then
fintech, so I know it. Exactly. I I believe in impact, and I feel both of you are driving impactful change in both your industries. Like I mentioned before, 850,000 women across 10 countries being affected and livelihoods being improved by such a tool. And Ati, I looked into how, for example, your program you set up with the RPA saved what 1 million man hours, which is a bit insane if you look at process improvements, right? Um, and I would like, and going more towards the end and wrapping up the conversations, you to explain how a process can introduce this level of, or maybe baby steps in which someone having a process in an industry can introduce a level of automation and build upon, and maybe a few baby steps, and your outlook as to what AI can look like in the next 5 years. So it's a twofold question in general, but just to get it out, dump it on you, and then you could wrap it up.
The baby step that I would recommend for robotics process automation is to start and start with a process that's simple, repetitive, and rules-based in nature, and also understand why you are doing it, right? So it's one thing for people to report in 1 million man-hours, and actually there's no transformation. Understand why you want to go into this journey of digitization and automation. For me, it is about transformation. Don't do it because it's the next shiny new toy and everybody's got it and you also want in on it. Understand why you want to do it and start off small with the agenda of transforming your organization. Understand the transformation is a journey, it's not a switch. And a lot of people seem to have this lack of patience for some reason. Executives are very impatient. They want a switch on and then everything is digital. Understand that. That to me is one of the biggest lessons learned on my side, where a lot of people are seemingly talking about these big benefits. They don't talk about how long it takes and the pain you go through. So understand it's not an easy journey, but don't start small, but think big. Then when it comes to the future, I find what I'm doing is the future. So in that there needs to be a convergence of technologies, right? And the more we understand artificial intelligence in its different facets and different applications, the better. Because what we are trying to do, if you look at the history of the first, second, and third industrial revolution, more jobs have been created than they are that got taken away. If we have that kind of spirit in mind of trying to build industries, build corporations that service customers, having customers in the center of everything that we do through the use of technology, I feel like that is the future. Whether it's quantum mechanics and flying cars, we just need to understand that they will be, all of these technologies are also not new. It is a convergence of technologies because the technology used in flying cars, it's something that's always been there. The innovative part is how it's all coming together. Maybe 5G wasn't there, but everything else is the same. The same as machine learning. It's an old age, AI is an old age technology that started in the 60s. But because now people are using more data, more machines, you're able to have different applications to it. So I think the future is in the convergence of technologies with having people in the center of everything that we're doing, because we need to improve our quality of our lives. Whether through in a corporate space, making more money for the corporate, improving on customer experience, improving on employee experience. Everybody will win if we have this good convergence of technologies.
And I'll hand over a similar question to you, Shamim. Regarding the future part was it's pretty straightforward, but in the sense of how AI, how you apply it and the application in healthcare, do you think I know you adapted in different facets. You have the chatbot, you have different facets of this in terms of computer recognition, right? Or computer vision, because you have the ability for people to also upload x-rays and stuff and get let's say extract bits of how would you call that, like assessments from doctors all over the world from this. And I would like to know if this is something in the application of this and how it can be rolled out, if there are baby steps in introducing this in different industries as well, from your perspective, and the future of AI.
Okay, thanks so much for that question. When you talk about artificial intelligence, as my colleague said, we should do all this based on our passion, what you really love. So you don't do something because Shamim is doing something in healthcare, she's doing something in food, and then you also want to do something like that. You should do something that you really love. For example, if you're doing fashion, how can I improve fashion with technology, with artificial intelligence? Any sector that you feel that you love, that you have passion for, is what you should embed the artificial intelligence in, because it really takes a lot of time and then to do all these that we are doing. And again, when it comes to artificial intelligence, again, I would love to emphasize that yes, there are a lot of positives that have come with it. The fact that it has been able to improve the use of the customer feedbacks, um, improve the use of the customer delays, for example, a bit of the interpretation of the x-rays and all that. Yes, someone would not love maybe to be interpreted by a robot or something, but then there are those who are willing, who don't have the time, or who are like, you know what, if I get the interpretation, I can again know what to do, or I can seek other the information or something. So if someone knows that, oh, this season, this is what most of food that is being taken, or so this in the next season is what I should do. So with a bit of AI, this is something that has been there before, but right now it's being applied in so many things. And we are in a okay for the future of AI. I think you're already living in the future because AI is here to stay. I mean, like, yes, most of people may not, okay, may look at the disadvantages of something, but they usually love seeing it in the positivity of something. Because when you look at the bit of AI, that all the things that you're doing now are having artificial intelligence in them. Look at the banking, the fintech, the health tech, the food tech, everything is having artificial intelligence in it. So in Africa for 5 to 10 years, this is something that we should work with, because even if we don't work with it, most of the things that are going to come are also going to be having artificial intelligence. Everything is going to be automated. So we'll just have to improve whatever we do. Because even the jobs that we have, so you have to have at least some, you have to know at least, for example, if you're a doctor, you don't only have to know, I have to operate someone, do this, but then there's also that part of the machine learning that have to know, if I'm going to operate someone, I'm going to do this and that. So there is that additional skills that needs to be added for us to be able to embed with artificial intelligence, because I don't think it's going anywhere. It's just a beginning. We are going to work with it, and yeah, the future is going to be so hot with it. So I believe we just need to take it positivity and then leave the negative. Because the negativity is usually there, but the fact that it's everything that everyone is using and you cannot leave it out. So we just have to work with the positivity as we are thinking of the negativity ways of how we can be able to remove them from whatever we are doing or improve. Yeah, everything has disadvantages and advantages. Nothing is only having positives only. So yeah, so that's it for artificial intelligence in Africa and beyond.
Thanks, Shameen.
Yes.
Uh, thanks. It's a good wrap up on looking at both the pros and cons of technology. Everyone knows with the introduction of technology, especially the conversation around AI, assessing it from an objective point of view is hard, right? And it's like you said, but looking at it from, hey, the pros and cons is running away, it's running off, and you run with it and influence it accordingly from an ethical point of view, or you stay behind. And I think this is the approach that we both have in this round. There's actually a pretty cool question from Shakila in the Zoom chat, and I'd like to read it out. It says, I love this twofold goal of improving both customer and employee experience through using AI. I wonder if there is a danger that AI leads to improvements, mostly for the typical customer or employee, or those that behave in expected ways. Could you tell us about how you monitor these goals and perhaps ensure that the AI is doing what it's supposed to? Or do you mostly monitor the final result of viability for the company at large? So,
You know, I was doing a course at MIT that spoke about the history of AI and how people were afraid that the robots are going to take over. Well, the robots are not going to take over anytime soon. So all of the work, the models that we built are supervised in how we know what the input is, we know what the anticipated output is. So therefore, the likelihood of it being destructive in nature is very slim to none. And there's a whole process, iterative process of testing, retesting, checking on the output. And even when you do go live, and this is where the continuous improvement comes in, where if we had anticipated that, Manny would take up this particular deal, but Manny doesn't, we look at that cohort, a group of people, and see what could we have missed in the building of the model, and see how the machine can learn from that output. So the beauty about where we are right now with having AI engaging with humans, it creates a feedback loop where we make certain assumptions, that this cohort of customers has a propensity to leave us. But it's only when we engage with those customers that we get the feedback loop to feed payment models. So there is that element of continuous training and continuous monitoring and seeing that whether we are getting the output that we anticipated. So that there's still a very strong element of measurement, because we do want to get the business benefits that we anticipated. So as I mentioned earlier on, that we have to build a business case to say we are anticipating X amount of customers will not leave us. So therefore we have to monitor that in order for us to substantiate why the models will continue running. So it's not as if the processes and models are running off by themselves.
Thanks, Ati. Shamim, is there anything you'd like to add to that? I think it sounds a lot business-centric and focused more on Ati, but Shamim, are there any points you'd like to add to that in general?
My colleague has said most of that, but yeah, for the bit of artificial intelligence, as I say, yes, it has advantages and also has disadvantages, but it's all about the way we work with it and how best we can bring the good impact out of it, because it's something that has really improved most of things. For example, the bit of a customer, and talking about the customers' feedbacks and all that, that only one person cannot do that. But then if it's the AI that is embedded into a human, it's something that, for example, the robot can do something that is multi-purpose, which is something better. And yeah, so that's what I think about that.
Thank you. Shakila, I hope that answered your question in general. Awesome. Sweet. Thank you. Then I would say we are, let's say, ramping down to the end of the session. In general, if there's any other questions, please feel free to put it in the chat. But I'm like I said, I was super excited to have this conversation with Ati and Shamim, especially because they're two varied industries. I mean, one, like the mobile operator, huge markets, business-centric, improving processes over time using AI, and healthcare. Shamim being the founder of Chill AI, driving the healthcare industry, driving visibility and female and oncology, giving them insights into like treatments, these two different angles. I was super excited to and honored to host the session and speak to you too. But thank you everyone, and thank you Ati and Shamim again for joining the session. And I'll say enjoy the rest of your evenings and reach out to us, LinkedIn, reach out to Shamim and Ati as well via LinkedIn, and let's keep the conversation going.